Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We're seeing them at their worst. We're seeing them when they're not able to breathe on their own anymore.
Frontline workers at a breaking point, families torn apart. We take you inside the COVID ward at Surrey Memorial Hospital. Also,
we're all grieving. This is unprecedented. And we need to do the right thing. And there is no roadmap.
Only the beginning. An update on the investigation into remains at a BC residential school.
Our whole family is still waiting on answers, and unfortunately, we'll never have the full truth.
Hi, everybody.
Seeking justice 1 year after her daughter was fatally shot by police.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. COVID case numbers are decreasing in BC, a sign of hope that an end to the pandemic is not far off. But in Fraser Health, hospitals are still overflowing. Tonight, our Belle Puri gets a rare look inside Surrey Memorial.
It's the reality of COVID that leaves frontline workers at a breaking point and families torn apart.
My husband got sick so fast that he was a 240-pound man that now is like skinny, pale man.
Joseph Trudeau was diagnosed with cancer in January and not long after that with COVID-19. He's 49. All of the patients in this intensive care unit are critically ill.
We're seeing them at their worst. We're seeing them when they're not able to breathe on their own anymore. And so it's quite hard to see people at that state.
Some days are tougher than others.
I just remember having one day where I had two patients. They were both on life support. And one patient was palliating. We knew that he was going to pass away. Another patient was crashing and not supposed to pass. And so, obviously, I can't be in both places at once. So you get pulled into the person who you're trying to save. But that means that someone ends up passing away by themselves.
For the past 15 months, Surrey Memorial Hospital's ICU has been running well above capacity.
Capacity not being ventilators, it's not beds, it's not physical space. Our capacity is actually people, and our people are tired. We've carried, somewhere between 40 to 50% of the total burden of COVID in the province at our hospital.
The third wave of the pandemic was the hardest.
It was a lot of sadness. I think that's what stands out. It was just very sad. Like coming into work, there was like a heaviness.
Joseph has been here since March. During that time, on top of everything else, his family lost its rental home to fire. He and Carla have been together since she was 17. They have 5 children, and she wants people to know COVID is real.
Look at my husband, people. Look at him. That man could die. And I could be all alone with my children, but that's the hard part for me. That's the hard part for me. Not knowing that if he's coming back.
Amid the falling number of new cases and loosening of restrictions, the COVID life is far from over for those who need care and those who give it to them. Belle Puri, CBC News, Surrey.
On Monday, we'll take you inside Royal Columbian Hospital as we see how staff and patients have coped with the third wave of the pandemic there. More than 72% of British Columbians have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. A record high 27,000 people got their second dose yesterday. For the fourth straight day in a row, BC has recorded less than 200 new COVID-19 cases. One more person has died from the virus. More than 1,700 British Columbians have died of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. One of them was a renowned pediatrician in Richmond who dedicated his life to helping kids and families in need. As John Hernandez reports, his loved ones are remembering the many lives he touched.
Whether it was cracking dad jokes or performing magic tricks, Jack Behrman could make just about anyone smile.
He really believed in bringing every bit of joy and fun you could out of every day, and I think that kids had that too.
Behrman was a beloved pediatrician in Richmond who died of COVID-19 last summer. He would have turned 68 just a handful of days ago. The date, a chance for his wife Cindy to reflect.
He had this most amazing kind of joie de vivre, like zest for life. And he had a great smile and a great sense of humor and told horrible jokes.
Behrman was born in South Africa. An avid traveler, he left the country behind during the height of the apartheid years.
It was just a moral choice to not be in a country where that was going on.
He came to Canada to practice medicine, settling in Richmond and starting a family. It's where he began to leave his mark in the field of child health. Among his crowning achievements, overseeing the development of a youth health center, which drastically expanded treatment options for families.
He really advocated for pediatrics here in Richmond, BC, and his special interest was really children with autism and children with ADHD and other developmental and behavioral concerns. And he really helped out many, many families over many years.
Last spring, Behrman contracted COVID-19. He fought the virus for more than 100 days.
It was a roller coaster until probably mid-July, yeah. And then it became very clear that he wasn't going to survive.
He spent his last months in the same hospital he worked and retired from. During that time, he even got to attend his son's wedding, which was held inside a hospital boardroom.
I think he was really happy to be there, but he was really done.
Instead of celebrating his birthday, his family is now writing his gravestone.
The middle line will be a friend to every child.
Behrman leaves behind a wife, 3 kids, and countless smiles. John Hernandez, CBC News, Richmond.
To Kamloops now, where a community is still grieving. It comes a week after reports of remains found at the former Kamloops residential school went public. Today, the federal government restricted the airspace over the area for the privacy of survivors and their families. Susanna De Silva has more on what the chief says the next steps there could be.
Hundreds of kilometers from Kamloops, a show of how the news is reverberating across Canada.
I wanted to show people that these were children. And I wanted to show them what 215 kids looks like so that they could understand that it was our children that were buried in those graves. It's not just a number.
On the Kamloops-Teshkwepmik First Nation, emotions are still raw.
We're all grieving. This is unprecedented. And we need to do the right thing. And there is no roadmap.
The First Nation says it expects to release a report about what was found at the end of June. In the meantime, it's taking the lead while working with the RCMP and the Coroner's Service. But other work is already underway. Archivists are scouring the records of the school.
Those sometimes are in ledgers or journals. They might be correspondence. Or other documentations.
There are boxes of documents shared in 2019 by the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, the Catholic order that ran the school. The hope is to digitize the records and share them with the First Nation. So far, no list of deaths has been found.
The records are dispersed in a number of places across the country, so we are working closely with other organizations.
In 1991, the order apologized for its role.
I can only imagine how much more powerful the apology would be coming from His Holiness, Pope Francis.
A public apology, not just for us, but for the world who also shared in those suffrages.
The chief is also asking that this Sunday be a national day of prayer. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Apologize for that technical difficulty there. On Vancouver Island, a powerful message from the Sawit First Nation. They held a march and memorial for survivors of residential schools, as well as the children who never came home. The nation took to a highly visible location, an overpass on the busy Pat Bay Highway in Saanich.
We know what happened, and it's unfortunate that it's taken Western science for the rest of Canada to believe what our elders have always been saying.
She says these are important demonstrations for many reasons, including for children to witness and remember, so these memories are carried forward. And a message from the Prime Minister today for the Catholic Church. He says it's time to say sorry and to hand over residential school records. But as Olivia Stefanovic explains, many say his government needs to act as well.
Chief David Moniaz of Pamichikamak Cree Nation is following the threads of his community's residential school stories.
This lady said that this girl was they came to get the girl in the middle of the night. They took her away. They never seen her again.
He's traveled more than 500 kilometers south in search of ground-penetrating radar to find answers and to hold the federal government accountable.
We're asking you to do the right thing, asking you to investigate and allow all this investigation to be done by international bodies.
Pressure is growing on Ottawa to investigate the deaths and disappearances of Indigenous children from residential schools.
An independent investigation is required.
The national chief of the Assembly of First Nations wants an inquiry into all former residential school sites to determine how many more burials there may be.
It is unacceptable if this situation remains in impunity or without full investigation.
United Nations human rights experts are in touch with Canada and with the Holy See.
The Vatican is also responsible.
The Catholic Church ran more than half of the schools, but it's the only institution not to have made a formal apology.
As a Catholic, I am deeply disappointed.
The Prime Minister says the Pope needs to say sorry, and the Church must release all residential school records. If it refuses, Justin Trudeau says the government is prepared to take measures to compel it to.
I think it's going to be a really important moment for all of us, particularly Catholics across the country, to reach out in our local parishes, to reach out to bishops and cardinals, and make it clear that we expect the Church to take up and step up.
This story is upsetting and can be traumatic. Crisis lines are offering support for survivors and their loved ones. The 24-hour Indian Residential School Survivor Society can be reached at 1-866-925-4419. The CUAS crisis line is another option and has lines for adults as well as youth. This information is also available on our website, cbc.ca/BC. And we'll have more on this in the coming days. BC is expanding the recovery grant program for small and medium-sized businesses. The timeline for applications will coincide with the next phase of the province's restart plan.
The program has been very well received. In fact, it's now oversubscribed. We want to see this program continue to benefit BC businesses. That's why I'm proud to announce that the program will remain open until July 2nd.
The province is also adding $130 million to the initial $300 million of the program. The funding will support 20,000 businesses, mainly in the tourism sector. Meanwhile, the Circuit Breaker grant closes today. That program has doled out $58 million to date. Activists on Vancouver Island blockading old-growth logging say their protest has reached a critical junction. According to witnesses, police in plain clothes stormed a camp early this morning, arresting protesters. Representatives of the protesters now say heavy machinery is heading towards the last camp, blocking loggers. That could clear the way for a logging road to the Fairy Creek watershed. No one from the Teal Jones Logging Company or the RCMP were available for comment. Over the past 3 weeks, more than 160 people have been arrested. And it looks like the concerns of protesters are shared across BC. A new poll is showing 78% of British Columbians are concerned about old-growth logging, and 74% support the doubling of protected land in the province. 85% feel it's important the BC NDP keeps promises made to protect old growth, and only 16% say they feel the government is keeping this promise. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, things not looking so great along the Skeena River. What's happening there with evacuations?
That's right. We continue to see snow melt and additional rain over the past 24 hours. It is running very fast and very high. I want to show you pictures from the past 24 hours along the Skeena River in the northwest near Terrace, and you can see how high and fast the Skeena is running. Now, an update just a couple of hours ago, the flood warning that was in place for the Skeena River has been downgraded to a flood watch. So the Skeena River has peaked at the 50-year return period last night. So we will slowly start to see water levels drop, but you can see the flooding left behind. We still have evacuation orders in place for two communities southwest of Terrace, New and Old Remo. So those communities still on evacuation order, but at least we're starting to see the water levels reach their peak and begin to drop. I do have more rain in the forecast for the northwest, Anita, so we may see some fluctuations over the weekend. We are just starting to see the first raindrops of that same cold front fall here in North Van. I might see you next later on in the show in a raincoat.
Get an umbrella, Joe. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Family and friends of an Indigenous woman fatally shot by police rallied in front of the BC legislature on the one-year anniversary of her shooting death.
We are very hurt and upset over this entire thing and distrustful of police.
On June 4th, 2020, Chantelle Moore was shot at least 5 times during a welfare check by an Edmondson police officer at her New Brunswick apartment building. The responding officer, Constable Jeremy Sun, says Moore had a knife. The officer then shot her. Moore's supporters want to see more accountability from police.
And what we need is action now. And we should have had it a year ago. We called for a review of wellness checks. We asked that trauma-informed teams go in so that, our people aren't shot immediately.
Quebec's police watchdog agency has investigated the shooting. Its report has been submitted to figure out if charges are warranted against the officer. In New Brunswick, members of St. Mary's and other Wabanaki First Nations gathered today to honor Chantelle Moore. Her death led to calls for an inquiry into systemic racism in the province. Her mother says a year on, she's still left with many questions about what happened that night.
Today we're commemorating Chantelle Moore's death. This is a ceremony that we hold in a 1 year after the event of her passing, and we're here to celebrate who she was and to reflect on the whole issues around her death, which still sit with us, a lot of unanswered questions.
An inquiry needs to happen. There are unanswered questions, hard questions. Someone needs to be responsible. Systemic racism is rampant in our country, and we as leaders can change that. But it's the willingness of the Premier of New Brunswick, and we need to hold the government's feet to the fire. We did the framework for the government of New Brunswick on the inquiry. We did the work. Here you go. And we were willing, to work with the Premier in the province. That's what needs to happen. Justice needs to happen.
It's been an emotional year, never mind. Just, this morning is, you just don't know that, as much as you try to prepare yourself for the day, it just never, okay. Yeah, it's just been quite an emotional morning. Not only me, but our whole family is still waiting on answers, and unfortunately, we'll never have the full truth because we're missing the other person to tell the other side of the story, right? And the only thing we can pray for is that we get to as close to the truth as as close as possible, and it's. Can we ever say it's enough? Because we've lost a full being. It's not like we took a truck and totaled it and it can be replaced. No, this was a whole being, right? So what comes out of it? Digging deeper for the truth is a big part of it. But also the justice part also, right? The process of this year has been probably the hardest ever, trying to comfort a 7-year-old who's lost her mom, and trying to have my own grieving, but you know, it's not easy, but we get up every morning and we do it, and we continue to fight for my daughter, and we will continue, you know, and not only for her but other people as well. You know, I think that we come together and we give each other strength.
RCMP are searching for a 13-year-old who has been missing from the Port Coquitlam area for almost a month. Noelle O'Soup, who also goes by Ellie, could present as either male or female. RCMP say Ellie is Indigenous with short black hair, 5'6", and weighs about 200 pounds. The teen was last seen on May 12th wearing a black hoodie with the word love in white letters on the front, dark blue jeans and black shoes. O'Soup is known to visit Vancouver, and police say the youth is very vulnerable and could be in danger. The town of Fort Resolution was the site of one of the first residential schools in the Northwest Territories. As Juanita Taylor reports, for years, residents have worried there may be unmarked graves in their community.
Wilfred Simon thinks a lot about the children who never made it home from residential school.
I get so emotional just thinking of kids that stuck there from their parents and, you know, taken away, and they're probably so lost, probably so hurt, and then they die, you know, in the arms of, they probably don't even know who. Yeah. All in this area.
Simon went to residential school. He fears there are unmarked graves here in the cemetery and in town. This community was once the site of St. Joseph's Residential School. 13 years ago, he called for an investigation to find out how many children died and who they were, but nothing was done.
They think that we're going against the Catholic Church, or we're not going against any church.
This is the site where St. Joseph's Residential School once stood. Children from across the Northwest Territories and beyond were taken from their families and sent here. But fires, shortages of food, and illnesses closed its doors in 1957. That's when the children were moved to another residential school in Fort Smith. Today, that legacy is on the minds of many people in Fort Resolution.
And he talked about children being buried in the yard here, too.
Lainey Bolio's great-grandfather went to St. Joseph's Residential School. She would like to see that site searched.
Yeah. I would love if we could use those machines here to do the same thing they did in Kamloops. I feel like it would be kind of a good sense of closure.
The chief of the Deninuque First Nation agrees.
I'm not sure if that really happened here. You know, it'll be something that could be investigated, and we should push for it. And hopefully, the community can heal from that. You know, to get it out. You know, say this really happened in our community. You know, instead of hearsay.
The territorial government says it is willing to work with Indigenous leaders to get to the truth.
The more we talk, the more we heal. And the more we heal, the better people we become. And I believe we're going to get there one day. The Native people are very strong.
And that strength is what keeps Wilfred Simon patiently waiting for answers. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Fort Resolution, Northwest Territories.
Across the country, unemployment rose slightly last month. 68,000 jobs lost in May, pushing the jobless rate to 8.2%, up from 8.1%. CBC's Peter Armstrong explains what's behind the numbers.
These numbers paint the picture of a sputtering economy. But for the first time in a long time, we have reason to believe that sputtering engine is about to catch and finally roar to life. Just look at where the worst job losses were concentrated. Ontario and Nova Scotia, the two provinces hardest hit by new restrictions. And as those restrictions ease, jobs should bounce back pretty quickly. Remember, we added more than 560,000 jobs in February and March on what was at the time a fairly limited reopening. But there has been real damage, and only once the economy is back up and running will we be able to see what damage will last long term. This has been one of the most volatile, most uncertain years on record. And as restrictions lift, that volatility doesn't just disappear, it shifts.
Now the big
source of uncertainty for employers is what happens. How do we bring people back? Are we able to bring people back, especially in those sectors that have been locked down for so long?
And it's not just sectors like travel or retail, of course. Participation rates, it's the number of people who are out actively looking for a job, those are also down. And they're especially down among women and among people of color. And sure, the economy is starting to creak open again, but schools remain closed in some areas, meaning parents simply can't go back to work in some cases. The most common job in Canada is in retail sales, and shops are reopening. But how many of those workers have moved or have retrained or have found something else? Employers are already indicating they're having a hard time finding workers, and that labor crunch will only get worse as jobs bounce back. So in a way, this is a month of transitions, away from sharp job losses and toward a huge swing in hiring. But it will remain a volatile and uncertain time as those long-term impacts of the pandemic remain. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, our heat might have passed, but in some other provinces, it's super hot. So when is it just hot and when is it a heat wave? Well, it turns out there is an answer for that. Here's weather specialist Fiona Odlum to explain.
Summer on the prairies, just like the frigid winters, we can see some extreme temperatures. On average, we get 15 days of 30-degree plus weather on the prairies. And when that weather lingers and that heat starts to build, that's called a heat wave. But what is a true heat wave? Let's start with the heat wave equation for central and southern Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and southeast Alberta. It's 2 or more consecutive days of at least 32 degrees combined with 16 degrees or warmer overnight, or 2 consecutive days with a humidex of 38 or greater. For northern Saskatchewan and most of Alberta, the metrics are slightly different. All you need is 2 or more consecutive days of at least 29 degrees with a minimum of 14 toasty degrees overnight, or 2 consecutive days with a humidex of 34 or higher. In northern Manitoba, it's 2+ days of 29 degrees or more combined with 16 degrees at night, or 2 consecutive days with a humidex of 34 or over. Environment and Climate Change Canada says over the next 30 years, we should expect the number of extremely hot days in a year to more than double in some parts of the country. So when the mercury rises this summer, remember to stay cool and to stay hydrated.
No concern about dehydration over here. Johanna Wagstaffe here with the forecast now. But Joe, I'm noticing a little costume change here.
Thank you. Yes, I've got my wardrobe team. They brought in the rain jacket just in time for the showers. Yeah, let's see if I can keep up the costume changes once a show. That's what the weather is doing. It is on and off across the south coast. The heat wave has definitely moved on, as we heard from Fiona, but let me take you to the current temperatures right now. Quite a contrast from the heat and humidity over the past few days. Just a 16 right now in through YVR. Much of the humidity has swept out. It's still a little muggy, but we're actually below seasonal today. And look at the radar right now, picking up a few scattered showers across Metro Vancouver here in North Van, seeing them come down very lightly right now. The main event is still to come. The low pressure system sitting just off the northwest coast is directing that cold front down across the island. So our band of rain that's just headed to Victoria right now, that'll be our story late evening, overnight hours. So not really getting to us until early Saturday morning, sticking around until about noon. Look at Victoria's forecast. Sunshine in the afternoon. This is a fast-moving system. I think we'll see sunshine in the afternoon tomorrow across Metro Vancouver, but behind that cold front, temps a little cool. Look how unsettled it is across most of the province, well below seasonal. In fact, almost 20 degrees below where we were hitting a couple of days ago. This is a much-needed shift in a weather pattern. Look at the fire danger rating for today, seeing pockets of high to extreme, with the exception of the northwest, as we mentioned earlier, where they are getting all of the rain. So lightning strikes coming with this, but the cooler temperatures and the rain should help the scale tip towards a positive fire weekend, I'm hoping. You can see the bullseyes for the rain along the coast, but everyone across the province getting at least sort of a 5 to 10 millimeter story. So here's that low pushing inland. Again, this is Vancouver's Saturday morning story. We'll see some sunny breaks towards the afternoon And then here comes Sunday's low. This will bring showers, I think, for the afternoon hours across Metro Vancouver. So sort of a bookended showery weekend, if you will. Temperatures right across the province behind that cool front, definitely dropping down, barely hitting the 20s in through the interior for Sunday. A lot of mention of the word January as people look at their forecasts. It's starting to feel like a true January. By the time we hit Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be back up to our seasonal highs based on our 30-year average anyway. But definitely a cooler and showerier start. Showerier, I'm going to coin that one, to the beginning of June, which isn't all bad. Okay, this is not a joke, even though this sounds like a setup. What do you call a one-of-a-kind 100-year-old fish? No, really. A conservation group working to protect the endangered white sturgeon of the Nechako River wants to know.
You're looking at a 335-pound sturgeon hauled ashore temporarily into a tank not far from Prince George. She's the biggest ever recorded by the Nechako White Sturgeon Recovery Initiative. Now, they track where she goes to help the species survive. They think she's about a century old and she needs a name. So to make your suggestion, visit their Facebook page.
Well, that's going to be a good one. Yeah, I'm going to go for a Sturgeon McSturgeon face.
Very original, Joe. Very original. I'll let you take that and run with it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, stay tuned for that. And sticking with the animal kingdom, another spring day means another touching duckling rescue. Love these stories.
Vancouver Fire Rescue Services pulled these little feathered ones back to solid ground after they slipped through a grate. You can see how they fit right in the hand of this firefighter.
Wow.
Credit goes to ladder 22 and a really long reach to get down into that drain. Oh, I love how they always just waddle off with their mom and things are good.
I know. That's our Friday story we needed.
Absolutely. You can never go wrong with baby chicks. Baby ducklings, I guess. Okay, Joe, thanks so much.
Have a great weekend.
You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Next local news is right here at 11 o'clock with Dan Bird after the National. Good night.
Good night.